Good evening, one and all, and welcome to Mechanics of the Fourth Wall. Tonight, I'm joined by Antonio Subirats. Do you want to say hello, Antonio?
Hello, everybody, and hi, Nathan. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad at all. We've got a live chat room running, although this show is considerably behind schedule, so hopefully we'll get a few people join us as we start the show off. And we're going to be tackling quite a complicated subject, which is basically people's belief systems and how they're structured through propaganda. And it's something that I've tried to dissect on probably at least half a dozen different video logs explaining things like Illuminati and subliminal programming. And I've never concisely got that idea across. And in a recent exposure of a similar thing, Antonio dropped me a message and said, would you like to do a hangout so we can hash out this idea and get it across to our audience so that hopefully we can pass on some useful information. So where to begin? Something that we've diced up for probably half an hour before this show started, have we not, Antonio?
Yes. To put it succinctly is very difficult. This is why people have written books on the subject, and this is why people who work in PR are paid as much as they're paid, because they've learned those things, the techniques, the tactics, the theory behind it. It's a very difficult subject to cover clearly, because it's part of the problem is we're talking about words and we're talking about images, and to describe the images we're using words, so the whole thing becomes very convoluted, but we'll give it a good go.
Yeah, with words, I tried to tackle that in a video log that expressed words as being magic spells, and they are in the truest sense of the word. And one of the examples I think I gave to you, it wasn't necessarily in the video log itself, was the example of asking somebody to get you a glass of water. Let's just check the live feed's all going happily. Yes, it is. If you actually just ask somebody with a reasonably wry smile for a glass of water, one will appear. And that in the most truest sense of the word is a magic trick. It's very basic, but we experience magic on so many levels. And the thing that I've always tried to, maybe my motivation is a way of getting it across. So in terms of flat earth, we're given a lie, which is nice and easy to see for most flat earthers when they are presented with it after finding out the earth is flat. And that is the globe. So we see the globe and then go, well, that's obviously a lie. But the mechanics that have been put in place to present that lie are no different to the mechanics for 101 other different things, and they're layers that you'll peel back and essentially assume that you found truth. And we'll get onto red herrings, things like the AE map probably later on. But if we ignore the bear traps, the things that people describe as being hidden in plain sight are not really hidden at all. They're there to be discovered. And upon discovery, you tend to find that the conclusion that you're drawing is very much the conclusion the person who's put the information there in the first place wants you to draw. And I was finding it time and time again with things like Illuminati symbolism and Illuminati programming, which is to say that you come across something like The Incredibles and you watch that movie and see superheroes. It's obviously a suspension of disbelief, but there's also plenty of subliminal Illuminati programming in there. So if you are made aware of this, you then look into what that symbolism has been placed for, or what that symbolism is, and you'll find that Illuminati is all powerful beings and demons, and there's people who, when you look one step further, who are our leaders, who are very heavily involved in this Illuminati worship of the devil, whatever you want to call it. And that's the kind of closing point that most people get to. And that closing point leaves us, or the people that discover this so-called truth, of having the impression that our leaders are actually powerful. And they're not. They're just people. But that programming has been a very complex and pre-thought out exercise. It's very deliberate. And I don't know, where do you stand on the sort of discovery after you peel back the first layer of the onion, Antonio?
Well, when I'd say just about all flat earthers were independent researchers or conspiracy theorists on other subjects, and a lot of them will be familiar about the tactics and language and tone and the mechanisms that are employed on the conscious level. There are, you mentioned the Incredibles and our leaders. Now, if you look at Tony Blair and look at David Cameron, now this is in the UK, we have these two leaders. Somebody compiled a comparison of the gestures that they both mimic. They're not natural gestures. This, pointing with your hand like this, is not a natural gesture. Nobody points when they're talking about something. Nobody naturally does this to emphasize their point. This is not a natural gesture. This is, okay? But the leaning on the lectern when they're answering a question and looking away from the person they're speaking to gives the impression that replying to this question is a little bit of a bother, but it's not anything I have to actually focus and be really concerned about. It's a bit of a pesky question. It's insignificant, and I can do it just leaning casually. That's why these gestures are done. There are gestures, physical gestures, that in the book, the Kabbalion, the Bremelin the Mage, the whole Kabbalah, all of that discusses gestures, things that are done to give an impression. Okay, now all conspiracy theorists now know about the Illuminati and the circling of an eye and all the hand gestures. And we assume that everybody who does those hand gestures is doing them for the same reason. No, this is the Illuminati basically sequestering a whole range of gestures, like, okay, I am actually doing okay to talk about this gesture. I'm not doing 666, and I'm not hiding 666, and I'm not expressing 666. But the mind of the person viewing it, if they believe that 666 is being expressed with the okay gesture, they will only see the 666. This is because you've had the thought that 666 is the devil causing everyone to use it as a premise for people doing that gesture. There are people doing that gesture who have never heard about the whole 666 ring, thumb to index. It's nonsense, but you have your subliminal consciousness prepped through propaganda, like the Baphomet sign and the astronauts. Over to you.
Well, this is it. I mean, I like to go back to the preconditioning, because this is something we talked about just before the show. The idea that you're softened up to these things. So if you've watched The Incredibles and you've got no idea of one-eye programming, you're not going to see any of that stuff. And we were sort of numbing over the idea, weren't we, of playing a very crude cartoon. I've stuck this up on my channel on Nathan Oakley 1980's main front page. And it's from about 4 years ago, when I was really heavily looking at subliminal messages. And it's a very crude and direct example of how they hide these messages. And the debate that Antonio and I were sort of having before the show started was whether or not you will actually know what you have seen at an early age. So are you consciously aware, and I know that children watch this show, so we won't describe what it is in graphic detail for the adults. Go and have a look. But when you're subject to sexually explicit material that's hidden subliminally, do you actually register it? And I think we both concluded that the answer's no, or at least initially. But the purpose of it is to soften you up so that when you see sexually suggestive material in teenage magazines, you're more comfortable with the idea because you've been softened up to the idea subliminally beforehand. And this ties into subliminal programming for the Illuminati, because it's already been seeded very heavily throughout a lot of the media. You only have to scratch the surface to find it. And it even occasionally gets, as we said at the top of the show, described as being hidden in plain sight. And in reality, I don't think anybody should disagree with me on this point. If you want to hide something, you just hide it. And when it comes to the media, it's too expensive and time consuming to put a random prop somewhere. Or to put it another way, nothing is ever placed on a set or used in a film or whatever without there being a purpose. Somebody's gone out, bought it, paid for it, got receipts for it and registered it, and then placed it in a particular way and lit it. And, you know, in other words, everything is contrived. And contrived doesn't necessarily mean that when there's stuff, quote unquote, hidden in plain sight, that when you find that information out, you've found any truth. Quite the contrary, when it's deliberately hidden so that you will look, scratch the surface, find something out, and assume that what you have found is the truth. And in the case of Illuminati programming, that truth is linked to power. That's the most critical part of it. We are given the notion through superhero movies that the things that are connected to Illuminati are men with lightning coming out of their fingers and, you know, powerful things. And I discussed it with my wife, sort of trying to sum up the show and sum up about probably a good 2-hour telephone conversation that Antonia and I had to get the sort of the main points on a 2 or 3 word description for the show. And it is so incredibly difficult to sum up the concept that people will be accepting of a first stage of programming. And the only way I could ever link it was quite beautiful, because it's flat earth related, because you can always use the globe. So once you understand how the globe programming works and the mechanisms that are used to present it to us, you can then look at all of the other things that might come into the future, things that they might be softening us up with on other different subjects that we might not yet see. So to all intents and purposes, if we hadn't been exposed to the globe lie, none of us would even register globes on TV. Not one of us would. But it is, ultimately speaking, predictive programming and subliminal messaging on the sort of highest form. So it is so flat earth related because of the globe making it such a nice example. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I think it's part of the reason that everybody who understands that the sky's the limit, that we are somewhere plain, somewhere flat. I've said this to various different people. It's almost like, you know, I don't like to talk about the Bible very much, but it's like the scales falling from your eyes regarding so many other things. So now, whenever a politician speaks, whatever is trying to be pushed on us, a lot of us see it really transparently. We hear a medical professional talking about a disease, and we just hear this agent for the pharmaceutical companies is trying to push something for profit. That's, you know, we just cut right through the, excuse parents, bullshit. We cut right through it. We see right through it. So with going back to what you said about the power, the gestures that are used by politicians and by other people, by priests. Priests don't sit in a chair like this telling their stories, and neither do rabbis. They do gestures. They wear garb. They project. And it's all done for effect. So the police, interestingly enough, are trained to recognize gestures and to develop like a callus towards them. So when you have a link of police with the riot shields and the helmets and all of this, and there's all the people that they're looking at, they're trained to see which one is going to be the one who's likeliest to give them the most trouble out of all the people they're looking at. They're not just looking at a mass of people and seeing them just as a throbbing mass. They're looking for markers they've been trained on. So
that training is the same as, again, we talked about this just before the show started. PR people training a politician on how to stand and make themselves look more powerful, because again, as much as I don't want to knock people who do hangouts without having them their face visible and they're sharing stuff left, right and center, the power of body language and facial expression is massive, and PR people know this. They know how on a psychological level you can affect somebody, and they'll train politicians in the same way, and people will then see that as being an act, like these people are putting on a show, which they are. You know, they're standing on a pulpit in the case of the religious people, and in the case of politicians, they're in front of the TV cameras. But they're very much coaxed in the way that they're going to give our information to us. And again, in the conspiracy arena, you can see this as them being, you know, acting, and therefore being scripted, and going back through the connections and seeing that there's a dominant force that's leading these people rather than a bit of PR training. But because it's a conspiratorial thing, they'll let that roll. They'll, you know, it gets plenty of publicity as long as it's not flat Earth related. They'll let anything roll. But so, again, if it promotes the globe lie, in case of things like aliens, they'll positively promote it as long as it links back to whatever particular theory they're pushing. In the case of heliocentrism, so they're always getting their body language pushed in a way that makes them seem like actors, and they're not. You know, then the acting thing, when people come to that conclusion, will only again lead you back to power structures and making these people, you know, on an unconscious level, you're back to people with lightning coming out of their fingers. And that's kind of something that I want to break down when people are talking about, you know, the devil worship. You know, I know Russian vids is constantly pushing the idea that these people are worshipping Satan. And I think the powers that should not be absolutely love that. You know, that's the net result that they want. That's why they've put all the information there, so that someone like him can push the idea that they're worshipping the devil, because that gives us the overriding impression that they have supreme power.
Yes, absolutely. And when you think about it, the idea that somebody might be worshipping the devil, if you accept without really truly questioning what you're accepting, other people worshipping the devil, you're endorsing, one, that the devil exists and that's why they're worshipping him, and that, you know, it might be a being that's somewhere in the background that could coax you into worshipping him, or doing this 666 symbol with your hand, that it's there in the background. Well, if you endorse that idea, you have to also endorse that between you and this background and there's somewhere else, there's the ultimate creator. Okay, this thing, this devil in the background, I'm convinced it's just an illusion. That they do ceremonies, that they get a sense of power. Well, people get this through straightforward hypnosis. So you can do your own transcendental meditation and change how you feel. Changing how you feel, feeling more powerful or more weak, more vulnerable, more afraid. It's all things that are within your control if you understand it. But if you think that there are entities in the background that could snare you, then you're more prone to seeing the world as something a little bit more threatening, which is part of their game. They want you to see the world as something more threatening, and they push all kinds of things to support that idea. Now, the whole having a religion as a means of communicating between here and somewhere else, I think I see a little bit of charlatanism there. I think you don't need really the religion. It's not like you're going to accidentally go around murdering people because you weren't aware that there was a creator. That could only possibly happen to you if you thought there wasn't. And when you understand that the place we live on was created, it's no longer an option. But for the people out there, and there are flat earthers who do believe in religion as a necessary or as a valuable thing, then, you know, fair enough. But the methods that are used, the the inculcating of beliefs without you knowing that those beliefs have been inculcated. None of us knew that our understanding of the globe was merely a belief. We didn't know that. We thought it was understanding of true knowledge, and it wasn't. It was just a spell, like you mentioned before. So we have two aspects in the world. The way that the illusion is created is through the physical, through gestures and words, which we can, yes, they have a crossover because they're not actually physical, but they do have a physical impact, like, can I have a glass of water? Those words being spoken out generates a glass of water that arrives at you. Okay, in simplistic terms, it's just somebody heard you, they got your glass of water. But in a subliminal, regarding the subject we're talking about, it's a great example for showing how you can affect things with just gestures and words. So you can say this, you know, in a language where you don't speak in a world where you don't speak their language, you're somewhere foreign, and everybody will understand. You're saying that you're hungry, you want food. So gestures relate information. We have gestures relaying all kinds of information, that people are powerful, that people have abilities that we would be lucky to have. They don't have these abilities. This is only something you believe. And this is all on the conscious side of the world, which is the world outside of you. Then there's the unconscious side of the world, the subconscious, which is the subliminal. So we have wizards shooting lightning, and we have politicians being powerful. And between the subliminal and the liminal, we make these associations, which is what you're saying. And when you think of somebody powerful, you automatically think of somebody shooting lightning. It's true. You don't think that consciously, but you think the image of somebody shooting lightning is an image of somebody powerful, able to create lightning, or, you know, use magic, and you associate the two. You do associate the two. I've just posted a video where there's a physicist saying that he is a superhero, that he has a superpower. He's actually saying these things. Now, he doesn't, and it's jokey, but he's actually said those words. And then he goes on to explain that he has the power to create things. No, he doesn't. But as in his thread, what he's actually saying, he's weaving a story, which is laying down the foundations for you to believe what he's saying. And this is the whole point of propaganda. And the subject we're talking about is the weaving of beliefs. So we have the practical world where we can ask for a glass of water and that actually has an effect. And we have a non-physical world where words have an effect that we're not aware of. And not just words, but images, which is why when they explain to you about the lunar lander going to the moon, they show you images which weren't filmed. There was no crew there filming anything going to the moon. It's just images for you to accept what you're being told and lay the foundations to your unconscious mind, to your subconscious, that what you're seeing is true.
And those images go much further than, when you say images, I'm pretty certain that people will picture rockets going up. And that's not necessarily what we mean by images. So as the astronauts are being prepped, they'll all have photographs taken, which people, again, like Russians and even people like Jeranism, and show you their rings, their Freemasonic rings that they wear. And these are images. So it's nothing to do with the actual traveling to space. That's the overall objective and the context of what they're showing you. But ultimately speaking, they're exposing you to images of rings of power. And these rings of power, again, have been seeded in your mind in a very unconscious way. again, so that if you were to scratch the surface and find that these people are Freemasonic and ultimately devil worshippers, if you want to boil it down that way, you have that image linked back subconsciously to all the programming that you've had planted in your mind through things like the opposite forces of good and God being evil and the devil. And if that's what they're worshiping, it must be all powerful. So then you get back to things like their clothing. You gave an example of priests and their robes. Well, again, the subliminal image that's planted in for lightning fingers, as we're going to stick on that example for the whole show, I can tell, is a guy in the robe. You know, it's the guy with the big robe and he looks demonic. I ripped it off entirely again for another video and started the video log being all demonic in a bathrobe. And as soon as you peel it off, you're just a random bloke. But those images, and it's ultimately costume in terms of rings and robes, are not necessarily something that people will pay attention to until they have lies exposed to them. And those things, again, like any good costume on a set, the PR people have made them wear these things, even if those PR people are portrayed as people laying the rings out on silk cushions at a ceremony for Freemasons. That again reinforces the idea that the ring has power. It's just a ring, it's just a bit of gold. It probably looks quite cheap and funky most of the time when I've seen them. They're horrible.
Yes. Well, I remember watching the long, it was a mini series on the Holocaust. And we have the Nazi soldiers with their machine guns and their dress, which Russell Brand got in trouble for pointing out that it was actually Hugo Boss who designed them. So, but anyway, so you have, there was a scene where the Jews were being herded to a train station onto the wagons, and there were these relatively few soldiers, considering the mass of Jews. On bullets alone, there weren't enough bullets to kill everybody. If they had just rushed the soldiers, they would have won. Okay, now we understand that they were pre-dosed up with a pacifier, with fluoride. They were all vaccinated before they went on, and they were all docile. Now, I was a child and I was alarmed, and I remember turning to my grandfather and saying, why did God let this happen? Why didn't God just switch off the Nazi soldiers so that everybody could go home? Now, I was an innocent child, but it was a legitimate question. Why did this not happen? Why did God not switch off the soldiers, you know, make them fall asleep or whatever? The reason I thought that is that my version of the world, my view of the world was, like most Christians, that God is a thing that intervenes and can stop the devil. That's not the world we live in. The world we live in, we have a creation and systems happening that we don't understand. We then create an idea of what those systems are, embellish that idea, and then believe that idea. So we believe that God could intercede, that the devil could intercede. We believe these things. The reason we believe these things is that people have created stories and passed them across to us. And we have no evidence. In fact, when we look, we have a preponderance of evidence that that does not happen, that you cannot, how did Jim Morrison put it? You can't petition the Lord with prayer. It's like, well, nobody would ever die if you could, you know? It's what's going on this earth is something we don't fully understand. And when people tell us this is what's going on, we should say, you don't know that. You just saying things. And when they tell us in robes, we should say, you're just trying to make yourself out to be important, which is why you're wearing robes and doing these gestures, so that we don't question what you're saying. And I know it sounds like I'm just talking about religious people, people who push religion, but it isn't. It's also people who push pharmaceuticals, people who push things. Now, when somebody's not pushing something, they don't do these gestures, they don't do these things. But to bring it back to the subliminal and the hiding things in plain sight, think how clever this is. You write in a written form, so that it can be spread, so that people will say, hidden in plain sight. You write this, you put it out there, you then hide things in plain sight. You then say to people, look at these things that are hidden in plain sight. And all of these people didn't see them because it was hidden in plain sight. What you've done is you've said to people, there's going to be things that you can't see because they are in plain sight. The things that are hidden in plain sight, you just will not register them. And you've actually achieved that. You have achieved that. It happens kind of automatically to a lot of people when we see homeless, somebody homeless or who looks homeless, begging on the street. If they're good, we notice them, we get a tug at our heartstrings, and we go and we get them a coffee, or we ask them if they're hungry and we get them a sandwich. But if they're not good, we don't notice them. And the truth is, this isn't to paint everybody with the same brush. A lot of people who are out in the streets begging aren't actually homeless. There are people out in the street begging who are homeless. The vast majority of people who are homeless are embarrassed and ashamed to be homeless. So they spend their times in libraries, away from the rain here in the UK. They try to seem like they're not homeless, and eventually they stop being homeless. The ones that we see begging, who are genuine homeless people begging, are usually people that have mental health problems that cannot pull off being a normal person just sitting in a library. So this is the whole hiding in plain sight, and then telling the world that this phenomenon called hiding in plain sight is part of how this whole propaganda and subliminal works. It's part of it. It's part of the programming. And then they show us.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, then they show us. They say, oh yes, look at these people who secretly worship the devil. Look at them taking a picture of themselves doing the Baphomet sign, and somehow this picture was leaked. It's like, no, 1 second. If these guys are secretly worshipping the devil, they would have done that gesture when there were no cameras rolling. They wouldn't do it with cameras rolling and then maybe it could leak. That's not the case. It's done to give us the impression that they worship the devil, which then gives the impression that the devil is something real.
Yeah, so to boil down exactly what you're talking about there. So we're talking about astronauts on the ISS, some of them suited up and some of them not suited up. They're all floating away as they do, but they're all doing, is it that sort of thing? They're all putting it into their hands in a circle doing that. And this is something that's highlighted by people. Look at them. Look, these people worship the devil, and worshipping the devil creates an idea of death, which is back to Freud and manipulation of our fear of death. So at a very primeval level, we want to reproduce, we want to have sex, and we want to stay away from things that kill us. And that is exploited with things like the convincing people that people are worshipping evil powers. That very much gives you a sense of foreboding when you scratch the surface to find this out. Suddenly you've got a fear of death, and the fact that these people, I say the fact, the idea, the belief that these people can actually influence you in such a way, either on a paranormal level, if you scratch beneath the next level, or just by the very virtue of the fact that the brain will make those connections to people who are superheroes because of all the Illuminati programming that's genuinely hidden. So this is why the subject is complicated, because the media likes to show us the fact that they can hide things subliminally. They like to tell us about the way they can hide things in audio tracks and backmask, and they like to expose these things again so that we will do them and discover things that lead you back to devil worship, and again it's back to power. All of these things that are quote unquote hidden in plain sight aren't. They're there to lead you back to power structures and power ideas and power concepts, so that when you find out who's put them there, you're back to the pre-programmed emotion, the base level emotion of being scared of something that might kill you. And these people aren't in a position to fire lightning across the internet and take us all out with crazy weapons and just make us all die with some plane that flies across the sky with subsonic frequencies that will make us all die in a heartbeat. It's kind of nonsense. But the conspirators are out there who will tell you that it's true because they've scratched the surface and gone down a rabbit hole that tells you this, can present the information in a very convincing way. They can show you all the steps that have been taken. It's unraveling the long and tedious measures that go into place to put those rabbit holes to be discovered, and the realization at the end that you're only left with a belief. You're left with the belief that these people can influence you and have power over us. And men are just men, women are just women. We all have great power, but it's all equal. You have no greater power than I do. And the powers that should not be, as they're described, have no control over us beyond what is placed in our own imaginations with subliminal messages, propaganda, and preconceived notions and beliefs.
Absolutely. And for the only thing, that the easiest way, the thing that has the broadest scope is fear. So if for the masses to be manipulated, as long as it's an undercurrent of fear, so devil, death, pain, suffering, evil government, apocalypse,
alien invasion.
And when I say apocalypse, I mean the old misnomer of apocalypse, meaning, you know, destruction instead of uncovering or revelation, which is what the word apocalypse actually means. But anyway, this whole, oh, everything could go really, really wrong, the sky could fall, all of these thoughts, they're pushed continuously. You know, it's there all of the time through the media, and it's always the media. And then if you don't watch television, somebody else watches television, you come into contact with them, they tell you, and you're like, what a bunch of nonsense, because it doesn't have the effect on you, because you weren't seeing the swirling symbols in the background, that you weren't under a spell whilst this fear was being pushed on you. So the foundation for the whole of the subliminal world, everything that is taught, that is put in there, that is not justified. So there are things that are justified that we do receive subliminally. There really are things that are totally justified, part of the normal world, you know. But there are things that aren't. All the manipulative things are put there because the guard, it's like we're prone, we're already extra alert. You mentioned this before we went on with the tree and the tiger. So we're already aware, and we're aware on a very conscious level of things, and we've not noticed that this has left a gap where things can go in subliminally very, very easily. That's why alarm and fear is pushed. It's as simple as that. That's why fear is pushed, so that lots of other things can be slipped in whilst you're busy looking out for something that could kill you.
Yeah, some of the best horror movies are based in space. And I think a lot of it just occurred to me actually, Antonio, that perhaps the very term globe lie has a little bit of a path in itself, in the respect that once you come to the conclusion that we've been manipulated and lied to, again, you have a power structure behind that, and that can only lead to, you know where I'm going with this?
Yes. There's always like the rabbit hole, the idea, you know, of going down the rabbit hole. It's like, okay, that's actually an illusion that was created, you know. We don't go down rabbit holes and there's a magical world. It's an illusion, but it's a very good...
You're saying the term in itself is a spell?
Yes, it is. It's a spell. But a lot of made phrases are there to explain something that would take longer to explain, which is why we're having to hash this out. We should ideally say propagate and propaganda. That's what's being used. There are two ways it's used. There's a physical sense and there's a non-physical sense. There's a conscious way and there's an unconscious way. Thanks. But people will be like, what? Okay, what does that mean? So we have to embellish. So in the expression down the rabbit hole, it's embellished. It's part of a long story. Now we know the story, so we understand the rabbit hole. But I've said this to David Wise, the end of the rabbit hole with all of the traps and all of the distractions and all is the flat earth. Well, no, actually, the end of the actual rabbit hole is when you wake up, have on the other side, you know, after your death. That's the end of the actual rabbit hole. But in it, from this dimension, it's the flat earth. It's the end of the conspiracies. It's the end of the hunt, not the conspiracies, of the hunt, of the quest for answers.
But that's not where the illusion ends. And David Weiss was a brilliant example of this, and I really hope he doesn't take offense if he watches this. But when I was asking about the whys and wherefores of flat earth, he came to the conclusion that it's the people worshipping the devil who are punting this lie. And the more I said to him, well, maybe these people don't have power, there was that cognitive dissonance, that disconnect. He's gone down that rabbit hole and found that truth, that these people worship the devil. Now, again, before the show started, we were dicing up the whether or not that's actually true. In other words, if you ignore whether or not A, they actually worship the devil, and B, whether or not the devil even exists, the programming remains the same and the effect on our emotions remains the same, regardless of whether or not they actually believe that they're the thing they're worshipping. When I like the Bohemian Grove thing. This got me a load of stick when I first tried to put this out there. So the Bohemian Grove thing is part of that Illuminati programming. You scratch the surface and you find that these people are, through the conspiracy world, we're shown people going to ceremonies and potentially even burning bodies. And that's so powerful an image. But part of the propaganda, again, you're left with the notion that the Illuminati, back to the Incredibles, that these people are therefore superheroes. They're all there. That's a perfect example. They're even in robes, aren't they?
Yes, yes. But the whole Bohemian Grove that was exposed by Ron Johnson and Alex Jones. So we can look at it two ways, and both of them are valid. One, we were shown it so that we would think, oh, look at these horrible things that they do and whatnot. But another way of looking at it is thinking, okay, wait a second. This isn't just so that we see it. It's not like, you know, the hat hidden in plain sight. It's not as simple as that. This is these people, so devil worshippers, and they have woven a world made out of beliefs for themselves. And they do things to prop those beliefs. It's the same with religion, standard religion. Catholics, I'm a former Catholic. When I found out that all churches have a freaking bone of a saint in the foundations or under,
it's under the altar, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, this is necromancy. What the hell is this? What
can you explain that? So, sorry, Antonio. What you've just said has boiled it down, and I understand exactly what you mean, but maybe a lot of people won't understand what that means. It's probably worth a bit of explanation.
Oh, okay. So, with the Bohemian Grove, these are people who have woven an illusion for themselves, where in that illusion they have power, and people react as if they have power. So they have that illusion, what's the word? Reinforced by people's reaction. So they believe it. They believe the illusion, and they do things to support that illusion. So like ceremonies and, you know, the whole like eyes wide shut type party and all kinds of stuff. But this illusion, this belief, leaks out onto, well, it's mirrored in other areas where we wouldn't expect it, like with the whole Catholic situation where churches are built on consecrated ground, which means it's extra special ground. The rest of the earth can go to hell, but this area, this is special, right? It's like, what are you doing? All of it is freaking special. But anyway, so this area is special, and this area here where we've put the bone of a saint, which is necromancy, the worship of a dead thing as having a link, a unique link, a vortex, as it were, to the afterlife that somehow allows everything to emanate and have this magical quality to it, okay? This is necromancy. This is the worshipping of the dead, the use of the dead. And with Christianity, we have things that were stolen from the Bacchus religion or the Dionysus religion of eating the flesh and drinking the blood. And it's like, what is this? And it's kind of made palatable through words. Well, the wine is kind of nice and the wafer, and it symbolizes, like, whoa, hold on a second. Is it symbolizing that I'm taking in something that has been transmogrified to mean something else or to represent something else, which is ultimately going to come out into the toilet? What the hell is this? I'd understand it if it was like a cleansing thing, you know, like those muds that you can eat that take away all kinds of parasites, but it isn't, you know. It's like, it's just, when you look into the spells that are woven, you see that they are spells. You carry on looking, you think, this is the crux of the spell. And from this point onward, the spell works. But from this point back, it doesn't, like with the Big Bang. From the Big Bang, everything, yes, great. But go back to the Big Bang, what's before? It doesn't work. So this is very convoluted. I'm aware of this. I can see you looking, thinking, what? So let me just recap. The elites have things that reinforce their superiority. And the things that reinforce their superiority are reinforced by their own circles, with the ceremonies, with the words they use, with the postures, with the furnishings, with the lifestyle, and also supported by people outside of that lifestyle that will go and stand behind cattle grids in paddocks watching celebrities. So they have the things reinforced by normal plebs who will just stand, So their worldview is completely justified to them, because it's obvious to them that they are special, that they are superior. They're not. It's just a spell they have woven amongst themselves. We have other spells that are woven, lots of different spells. Some of those spells are called religions. Some of those spells are called conspiracies. Some of those spells, there are lots of different spells. Now, the word reality is quite an indistinct word. There are various different meanings that it can be considered to have. But real world, truth, the word truth is, it's been dissected a little bit and distorted a little bit. You can have your truth and I can have mine. It's like, no. Truth is one thing. You can have one interpretation of it, but it's not your truth. It's your interpretation. So the weaving of spells that we have the mechanisms through which they're woven. We have the things that are woven and the results of those things. What we don't have is the main reason why they're woven. Is it just woven because they're psychopaths and they like to weave spells and aggrandize themselves? Or are they woven because there really is a devil causing them to be woven? Or are they woven because we were created with free will, and the free will to invent gods and invent spells and invent machines and invent things? We do have that free will. So we've invented the idea that maybe death is the end. Well, no, it can't be, because if there isn't something coming out of nothingness, then there's also not a possibility of somethingness going into nothingness. That's not just, it's not available. It's just not something that's possible.
But we may not know the answer to the why behind the lie. I mean, you boiled it down to about 3 different things, one of them being psychopaths. And the point in this particular show is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the purpose behind it is, when we can spot the mechanisms that are doing it. And now that, okay, I know I keep saying this, it's just repeating it again, but now we've got a nice example with the globe lie, you can actually point out other mechanisms for the next level of programming, the next level of lies, the next deception, because because of the level of it being so contrived, this is only in a very short period of time that I've gone from sort of upping the percentage of how much of the media that we get exposed to is contrived. And even having worked in it to a certain degree and seen it being contrived, you still don't register the fact that it is when you're watching it back on TV. It's not like this. It's not like a conversation. And even this, I've set this room, I've dressed it. You've moved your camera into a position that looks nice. It's still, to a very small degree, contrived, nowhere near the level of the stuff on our televisions, and even how the things they like get exposed to the internet.
But isn't this part, you're aware of the horns effect and the halo effect?
Go on.
Okay, so in propaganda and image control, there's something called the horns effect, as in horns, like, you know, a bull has horns, and the halo effect. So if I had some flowers in the background, lovely flowers, they would be acting as a halo effect that would make people think, oh, you know, even not if it, and it's not a conscious thing. If I had a sock, a dirty sock, then you would have the horns effect. You know, people would just be like, you know, it's something that's done visually. So the reason that we have placed things, it's not to give an illusion of order and stuff. In one of my videos, I show my freaking place. It's chaos here, okay? But we don't want to distract. I haven't had to move things away. I've got a blanket here, you know, that I put over my shoulders sometimes, and I've just moved it out of the way so that people don't sit there thinking, oh, is that a little dog? That's all it is. But there is this thing, like you say, in the media, you have the horns effect and the halo effect, which is why between takes, they come in, they touch up the makeup. They want everything pristine and correct and nice to give an illusion. And that's an illusion of being calm and centered and everything working out fine, when really behind the scenes it's chaos. It's not fine. It's an illusion. It's all illusion. So when with propaganda we have the illusion that the Jews are evil, or the Nazis are evil, or the communists or whatever are evil, okay, and you need to do this, and you need to read this, and you need to sign here. Oh, and by the way, we need a little bit of money for this thing over here. And then you need to do this other. The whole point of it was for the, oh, and by the way, we need a little bit of money here. The whole of it was for that. But that bit just slips by. In fact, you'll even justify it. They'll say, we need £5 for this. And do you know what? I'll give you 50. It's like, that's the trick. So fear is used in a similar way, so that you're vibrating at a frequency where people can just say, oh, by the way, we need £5 for, or we need, you know, it's so that the lie can be used. You know, the whole weaving of the spell is so that the lie can be used. And it's always to benefit the person weaving the spell.
Of course. And there's another type of spell. Again, this gets confused and described as being hidden in plain sight when people pick it apart. But when you've got things that are quite like really contrived, and again, this is always going to be the best example, but NASA. So the stuff that we're being presented at NASA is so unbelievably contrived. You know, they've got whole teams of people that they show us at Mission Control that are ultimately just editing together footage. You know, it's a joke when they show you on Simpsons and actually portray it in that way. That's what people think when you say hidden in plain sight, when they make a joke about that sort of thing. But in reality, the trick, the actual magic trick, is the rocket, it's the firework, it's the smoke and mirrors. And we'll use David Weiss again. He's doing it the most prevalently at the moment. He's doing a really good job of it. But when you expose the smoke and mirrors, when you show people the trick, if your programming is of such a high degree, if you've exaggerated people, I'm going to use this term, we'll dissect it up afterwards, but if you've brainwashed people with the idea that the globe is true, you've got the best trick in the world when you can actually expose the magic trick. You can pull back the curtain, you can expose the smoke and mirrors, and people will still try and justify that trick as being real, still believe the nonsense. because the programming is just so deeply rooted that they have that disconnect, that cognitive dissonance, the inability to accept something that's been showed to you, that's been exposed. I'm going off on a slight tangent here, but in the comments section of one of David Weiss's videos, it was, I can't remember, the bendy door or the girl with the hair. It was one of them. Just, you know, there's just a stack of terrible NASA footage at the moment that people have pulled to pieces and said, look, this is obviously how they're faking it. And a guy was like, well, and you haven't actually proved they're faking it. You've just shown comparisons to how they could. And you go, so unless I actually have an iPhone in my hand and walk into the studio and catch them red-handed, there is so much cognitive dissonance stacked up that you will never accept it. And that's the beauty when you've got such carefully thought out, long drawn out programming and preconceived notions, leaving people with a belief that's beyond belief. It's accepted as fact. It's no longer a belief. I know this is something that I've kind of robbed off you and run with.
Well, no, it's with the proof thing. Okay, so you have the bendy door on the space station, and people will who are clinging to the idea that it's a globe will look up and find, oh no, it's not actually necessary for it to be a rigid door, and they don't stop to really think. Well, obviously, because of the cognitive dissonance, they don't stop and take a break and look again and just relax and take in what's there. The door, when it's shut, it looks very rigid, very sturdy. It's supposed to just be some kind of cover for shielding from heat or from whatever, but they close it, they spend a long time closing it, they're only going to have to open it, and it looks very sturdy. It's supposed to be a thermal insulating thing. It doesn't look like a thermal insulating thing. The supporting evidence for it to being a thermal insulating thing, people say, look, they're supporting evidence. It's like, for God's sake, of course they're supporting evidence. They can't just not support it and not say a word about it. They have to support it. So you show images of astronauts with bubbles flying off to space, and the people who say, oh no, the cover is there for heating, you say, what about the freaking bubbles? They just don't talk about it because the cognitive dissonance has gone too deep. So no matter what proof.
Talk about bubbles. Sorry to interrupt you, Antonio.
Yeah.
But this is another part of truth in plain sight. So part of the clever programming is to actually expose you to truth and reality along with nonsense and fabrication. So on the one side, we've already gone through the lightning out of your fingers, and that is set against a backdrop of space, giving you the predictive programming element of it. But you have the same but opposite when you use things like the neutral buoyancy lab. So they shove it in your face what they're actually doing so that you won't question it or even disregard it. It's like the confession of a killer in their novel before they've done it. It's the same sort of principle. I'm spitballing here. Would you agree?
Yes. It's basically all just a way to excuse if caught and a way to support until caught. That's what it is. It's stop-gapping is what it is. They can't demonstrate that the space station is actually really there because it isn't actually really there. If it was, it would be, there wouldn't be any flat earthers. People wouldn't understand that the world is flat. We would all think they actually went to the moon in a thing made out of freaking foil, which would have electrified the whole thing when it went through the Van Allen radiation belt, because it would be the same as putting freaking foil in a microwave. One of the people who commented pointed that out. I thought, oh my God, of course, it really was. It freaking, oh. But anyway, with the things they've shown us that are so ridiculously flimsy, and the things they've written to support and produced to support those flimsy things are there just for the globalist people who haven't let go of the globe yet. When we point out at the missing things, like no footage of something actually leaving, no footage of satellites from other satellites. Oh, here's a weather satellite. and somehow there's no satellites going across. You know, there's like, it's all just one satellite. Whatever's shown is only one satellite, or images of one satellite without mentioning what's capturing that image. And when questioned, they say, oh yes, it was a different satellite somewhere else. It's like, oh my God, how can you not see that you're being manipulated into supporting what they're trying to force you to support, which is not for your best interest, it's for their best interest.
Then so how do we get this message nice and concise for a flat earther watching this, who totally gets the bits that we're talking about in reference to the globe? How do we make them understand that there's the time travel stuff, for example, that's very much presented in exactly the same fashion? How do we make somebody draw that association so that they can recognize next level programming?
Well, this is what I would do. I would say, look for red herrings, or look for similarities. Look at things that are supported in the same way. So you have quantum mechanics supported by theory, and experimental physics, noticing things that are, some of them discussed by quantum mechanics and some not. Some things not understood. And when you have a theory on anything where it's supported only by further theories, then you have to, you shouldn't just accept it as truth. You should leave it in parentheses, or you know, ... inconclusive, not sure. Now, if you traveled to the future and came back, then you have something that you can say. If a friend of yours came to visit you but was 10 years older and then disappeared, then yes, you can have more supporting evidence. But when something is presented to you in the same way as the globe, and I say this again, and I apologize to all religious people, because I know that most religious people have the reason they're religious is that they have a need to be working on the side of goodness, and that's where religion was planted, so that it can use that desire that people have to be good and manipulate it. It's not necessary. You're good without the religion. But anyway, so you have the systems that are used to prop up beliefs. When those systems you find in other areas, time travel, whatever the other areas are, just don't be desperate to arrive at a conclusion and, you know, sign a document, you know, and be completely convinced that this is true. Just say you don't know, you know, you wait for further developments or whatnot. It's like with the globe, they didn't wait for further developments before they announced the globe. They said, oh, it could be this. There are a couple of things that won't work under this example, but we'll make sure we don't mention those further. We'll mention the things that kind of seem to, but not the things that don't. I'll give you an example. I discussed this with somebody recently. The moon, when the moon is a crescent moon or lit, when it's not a full moon, or when you have the sun and the moon in the sky at the same time, the moon, the angle at which it's lit, is not the corresponding angle to the sun. It's off. So either it's being lit in a circuitous way, or it isn't being lit by the sun. Now, I personally think it's not being lit by the sun. It's just a vague reference towards the sun by the moon. But the moon is an enigma. We don't know anything about the moon, and neither does NASA. So, which is why they claimed that they went there. It's like, there you go. This thing that we couldn't figure out, well, we didn't quite go, but we're going to make out like we did. Here's the footage of us making out like we did. And there you go. It's done. No need for further questions, because if you do further question, you might discover that you're on a flat world. You might discover you don't have any need for religion because your connection is immediate. It's not something you need to confess or use some portal to arrive at. It's part of a self-running system where people can create things in that, whatever they want to create, be it a Tower of Babel, be it an ark, be it whatever. People can create whatever they want. And unfortunately, what some people like to create are illusions. And the mechanisms that the fourth wall mechanics, we're basically discussing, you know, with the analogy of a car, you have the vehicle, and you have the engine, and you have the driver. So there's not just the car and the parts, which is all the conscious level programming, propaganda, images. You also have the non-conscious, well, yeah, bad analogy. You also have the more ethereal driver. Okay, this car's brakes keep going. It's not going because the car is faulty. It's going because the freaking driver drives too fast and cramps on the brakes all the time. You know, so we have this the yang. I'm going to use the analogy of the yin and yang. Okay, we have the physical world, and we have all kinds of things embellished and created and woven into the physical world to support something that is also supported subliminally by us, because of the things that are put in there that we don't notice, which is what subliminal means. You don't notice. We notice things hidden in plain sight as if we were noticing something that was supposed to be hidden. No, that's to make you think you're noticing what's being hidden, so that you won't notice that there are things being hidden that are affecting you. So it's almost like the yin yang. The physical world is the yang, and the quiet non-physical is the yin. Both of them have an interaction, and both of them create our experience of the world. Now, earlier you mentioned David Weiss, Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole, and you mentioned death. Just suppose we lived in a world where fear wasn't something that was created and embellished and woven, where fear was only something that was used when fear was actually required. Like, you're in the forest and there's a freaking bear. Okay, now fear is required. The rest of the time, you don't need fear. You know, just you look up at the sky, make sure no eagle comes and swoops down and tries to take your head or your baby. But you know, generally, in the natural world, fear is a very limited thing. Okay, we live in this unnatural world where we're removed from nature, and we have this fear continuous. This stress level is high. That the ability for us to be affected subliminally is really, really wide open. In this world of fear, there's this fear of death. In the world where there's very little fear, you have the famous, was it one of the Dustin Hoffman films with the Indians, where the shaman says it is a good day to die, and he goes off and lies down to die. And then after a bit, he doesn't die. Then he comes back down and says, oh, it will be another day. But, you know, there's no worry, because their world wasn't filled with fear. And I agree with the idea that death isn't what we've been told it is. We've been told it's this: either you go to hell, or you're rewarded, or you're obliterated. That's it. That's it. There isn't another option. Say, wow, who's saying that? People who use gestures to tell us. Maybe we shouldn't believe those things. Maybe we should just either wait and see, or see if we can come to our own personal conclusions, and either discuss them with other people as our own conclusions. And if they resonate, or if other people have arrived at the same conclusion, then fine. But not push it, and not say that somebody else's conclusion is false, which is why I keep apologizing to religious people, because I think maybe the idea of Jesus was created for a purpose, and the great mystery thought, you know what, I'm going to use that thing that you created for your purpose, and I'm going to turn it and manipulate it and have it used for good. I'm going to thank you for that idea. I'm going to allow it. I'm going to engage with it so that it does work how you say is going to work. That's, you know, it's just an idea.
Well, the people that control us must have power, and knowledge is power. And I think there's a school of, there's a camp that would say that they don't know anything. They have very limited knowledge. And if you don't know anything, and you're on the same level as everybody else that's capable of doing all those things, discussing them and coming to a consensus, you have no control over those people. So even though you don't know anything, you know, it's disaster for them to find out the lie of the globe, because ultimately it leaves them in the same boat as us, knowing the same things, or not knowing. There may be things that we can never find answers to, but that doesn't jive well for control structures. They need to be able to tell us that they know everything, and lead us down very dark rabbit holes if we find out that there's perhaps limited knowledge from these people. They might know nothing.
They might know nothing and be just trying to give the illusion of knowledge and therefore power, or they might know stuff that they really keep secret, that they don't explain. We don't know. We can only assume either they do or they don't. If we look for things that reinforce the idea that they don't have power, we will find those. If we look for things that reinforce the idea that they do have power, we'll find those.
Exactly.
But you can look both ways, and it depends on your bent of mind and your attitude and how you feel that day. If you're feeling a bit unwell, you're going to find more negative things. If you feel a bit better, you're going to find more positive things. Now, part of the chemtrails and poisoning water and stuff is to have people feeling unwell, because we're more likely to find the negative stuff. I think my personal opinion is they do know things. They had Tesla's documents way before they were released, so they do know things that we don't. This is what I think. Okay, when I say they do know, and it sounds like I'm certain about it, I'm just saying I think they do know things. I think part of what they know is that we're on a flat world. I think part of what they know is that we don't die. I think part of what they know is that everything was created, and when we leave these physical human avatars, we go back to source, like back to the one consciousness, back to the goodness, back to the thing that created everything for whatever purpose. I think they know this, and they are dedicating themselves to developing a system where they can be exempt from returning to source. They don't want to return to source because maybe in source they won't have a very good time, because they have to kind of purify themselves from the thoughts they've had and the actions they've done, and not as a punishment that was set up with vats of lava and pitchforks, but just as a thing that is unavoidable for an energy form to be accommodated in another energy form that is positive or benevolent. So the negative, the malevolent, has to stop being malevolent before it can be accommodated and not suffer. They'd rather, the ones that are malevolent would rather not go through that. And I think this is why they're developing systems for cloning, developing systems for transferring consciousness, developing systems like weaving the illusion of the globe to try to have the humanity's mindset already help with the separation in a way that we don't fully understand, using mechanisms we don't fully understand. So I think, well, we know that they tell us something so that we'll be prepared for it, so that we will help manifest it. I think they've told us we live on a globe, there might not be a God, so that we will try to help and manifest that. It doesn't make it true, it doesn't make it real, but they're hoping, they're going to use every avenue that they have, and we know with the subject we're talking about, every technique, every opportunity, every system, every avenue from the youngest age continuously. So I really think these guys don't want to face the answer at the end. I mean, simply imagine your life has been bliss continuously all of the time. I know this is hypothetical. Nobody actually goes through this kind of life. You have what you want, whenever you want, all of the time. And suddenly you're in a place where you don't. Just simply not having those enjoyments could be seen as a punishment to you. Now, take it the other way around. A life that has continuously needs consolation, needs pain relief, needs everything all of the time, and you're now suddenly somewhere where you no longer need those things are covered. That will seem like a reward, you know? And I think the elites are trying to get to the point where they don't have to get to the point where they are no longer special, no longer supreme, no longer the best in the class, the best in the club, the wealthiest, the one with the biggest. They don't want to be at the point where they're just as relevant and significant as everybody else. They don't want that. They want to be more. And I think they're trying
that idea, that exact statement, is something that I kind of wanted to round out the show with. I mean, I won't mention the particular person's video that I watched recently, but they were a fairly new flat earther, and it seemed to me the context was being overwhelmed and leaving that person in a state of distress and despair because of all of the realities that come all at once when you discover flat earth are immense. And I can totally understand why it drives a lot of people completely nuts, because of the benevolence that people must feel when they see powers perpetrating such a massive lie. That can give you that's such a scary notion, or you can understand why that would scare the living daylights out of some people.
Yes. Now, there's an idea. So with 9/11, the first person to question, now when I say the first person, I'm talking 100 monkey syndrome. There was lots of first people everywhere who, whenever you realize it, you're not timing and saying, haha, I realized it on day 17. Oh, here's somebody who realized it on day 21. It doesn't matter. So that's not first, okay? When people realized and questioned, and eventually it became a movement of people questioning and saying, hold on a freaking minute, what about building 6? What the hell, you know? The majority of the world hadn't gone through that stage. And when they hear, what about building 7 that collapsed and was announced beforehand, they're like, what are you talking about? No. And there was this rejection. Over time, the number of people saying, yeah, do you know what? I think Osama bin Laden had absolutely nothing to do with it. More information has come out. Court papers have come out. All kinds of things have come out demonstrating that the official story was a fabrication. Now, with the globe Earth, oh, sorry, let me go back. So back in the day when a 9/11 truther is trying to tell somebody else, dude, it doesn't make sense. Look at how fast they're building. So we have this challenge, this confrontation, this need for them to understand so that they will stop endorsing military operations. That's mainly it. Stop endorsing military operations. And very quickly, you'll see, you'll also stop endorsing the taxes that are spent for military operations. And everything will kind of sort itself out in the way that David Pratt would like it to be sorted out. We're not going to sort it out by challenging, by pushing ourselves against the cogs and gears of the system. That's not what's going to sort it out. It's dying its own death naturally. But yes, we can simply help by just not engaging with it. But 9/11 challenging people challenging back. We've all gone through this, I assume, I certainly have, with friends and acquaintances. The same thing. It's like, oh, hold on a second. Eventually, with 9/11, we thought, do you know what? I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I've already started to see that the number of people catching on, realizing in their own time, is growing massively. Now, I'm saying to a lot of people who are new, who are thinking, oh my God, I can't believe this. I want people to realize this because the essence of it is so good and healthy that you want to share this with other people. You want other people to understand that there is this connection with the great mystery, that there is. So we've all been trying to engage other people and met resistance. And I'm thinking, do you know what? Yeah, follow your instinct. Do what it feels instinctive to you. But to some people, the instinct is going to be, after you've had all those challenges, to say, do you know what, guys? And this goes to some friends of mine. Don't look into it further. Don't ask me about it. Just let it go. because I know that, like with 9/11, they will find things when they're ready for them, and that's it. We don't need to push it. We don't need to go blue in the face trying to freaking point stuff out that is so completely obvious, like the lack of curve. Now, this is the thing that globalists, you know, they become vexed. They're even maybe talking about changing the equation, but it's not going to work, because then the world would have to be much greater, which would say that they were talking shit from the beginning. But we don't need to go blue in the face or feel exasperated or desperate or frustrated. We don't need to. It is just already taking form. People are already starting to question all the new flat earthers that, like you just mentioned. There are people there who've been flat earthers from very much the beginning. There are old people that I'm in contact with that have been flat earthers for a freaking long time, and they've just been sat there patiently waiting and waiting. And they don't make videos, but they're so thankful that we are making videos, you know. I mean, can you imagine being in your 70s, being aware of it since your kind of late teens and just waiting? It must be like bliss to those people. But in terms of the new flat earthers, don't stress, please. Don't see stress in people's challenging you. When they challenge you, just say, I pass, you know, let's talk about something else. Just up to you. Like I said, use your own instinct, go with whatever you want. If you want loud, heated arguments, then have those. And if you don't, just say, sorry, got to go, you know, or no, we're here to work, we're not here to talk, let's work. You don't have to give everybody the answers. And this is the other thing. Nobody spoon-fed us. Nobody came and said, open wide, here comes the plane. So when people are asking you stuff, you say, hey, dude, I'm not going to freaking spoon-feed you. Go and find out on your own.
I remember seeing an early Math Powerland video where he basically said exactly that. It was about Facebook posts, and someone would come up and immediately demand he justified a certain globe proof, and it was in the days where it was all capitalized, you know, everything was in capital letters, you know, to basically go back to them and say, why should I spoon feed you this information? Go out and do your own research, figure it out for yourself. I don't care what you think.
Yeah, brilliant. You know what I've started doing? I mentioned this to Patricia here. Sometimes you get, okay, so this kind of ties in with what we're talking about, which is the effects that the response that people have, which is created by the whole weaving of illusion and nonsense. But there are people who are genuinely annoyed, who are not trolls in a natural troll way. They are freaking annoyed that they're not getting the answers, that they think we are trying to hoodwink them and all of this, and they just persist, continue. And then there are the trolls. They use very crafty techniques, like joining those people's threads and saying, yeah, what about this? And it's like, no, dude, I know that you're a troll because you keep skipping things, you know, that I'm mentioning, you know. So there are tactics that the trolls use. So there are people who appear to be trolls because of the way that they behave. And then there are real trolls that come and engage. Right. With the people who are real trolls, and also the people who aren't, the people who are really feeling like we're all deluded, and they're trying to help us to see that it's a delusion. Okay. Those people, eventually they get annoyed, they get frustrated. And I said this to Patricia Stay, I think one of the best things to say when you're being challenged and when abuse starts being used is to simply reply, does somebody need a hug? And just that.
I know the anger. I saw it. I saw it recently. You see it time and time again. But I won't use the expletive, but basically swearing and then saying, you guys will justify anything to prove that the earth is flat. And you kind of think, why the anger? Why? Who cares? If this was a Christian channel, although we have spent some time talking about Christians, I don't think we've bashed them in any way, shape or form. No. And if we were...
I was going to say, I have bashed the manipulative side of it that we all know is there. We know that there are elements that are deeply, deeply sinister. But I kind of think I rescued it by saying that I think the Great Mystery could have used the avatar for its own means. Yes. So
it's contextual. It's about power and power structures. So you know, but my point is that if this was just a discussion about religious subjects, so like Robin Poe does a Bible session, and if it was just that, you wouldn't dream of going into one of those sessions and saying, "I'm not converted. Why on earth would you be telling me these lies?" You just think, "Oh well, you're entitled to your beliefs. I'll go about my business." But people can't. They can't do that. There's just no way.
Let's imagine that there is somebody, a group suddenly starts up who really likes Wellington boots. Okay, and they think that Wellington boots are just the best shoe for whatever weather. You can use them as to carry water in an emergency and whatever. Okay, and it was something that just didn't really interest you. Why would you go in there and argue saying, no, Doc Martens are better? It's like, why would you? Just let it go.
And if you were a collector of Doc Martens and you felt that passionate and you just happened to be on that video, you might leave a comment and then think, oh, I'll leave a comment and run. And then when someone responds and goes, "You idiot, Doc Martens are a load of rubbish," you might respond. But then when they start swearing at you, you'd give up very quickly and think, oh, sod this. This isn't worth my time.
Yes. But the trolls are very good at engaging, but I don't want to give too much time to the trolls, because there are trolls, as we know, that are paid to be trolls, that are paid shills. We call them shills, but they're also trolls.
I don't know that. I've got no proof of that.
We have guys that are trying to just spouting nonsense.
There are guys that do it day in, day out. That much I will concede.
Yes, and they use different sock puppets as different people challenging other people. So it's, I don't know. I mean, is it damage control? Who knows? It's not important, because there's no turning the world into a globe. That's not going to happen. Back in the days when there were people,
you can't really hide the shape of the earth. This is the thing that I'll give another example, and it's something that I think we vaguely touched on this. But when it comes to things like cloning, we've got cloning going on, and we know about it. Genuine cloning and research into cloning. Yes. But in terms of the context that people put it in, when people are dreaming, and it's all the Freddy Krueger style avatar, that concept of somebody going into another body when they fall asleep, that has no basis in proof. So sometimes early on, when you come across these things, you research them, realize they're complete nonsense, and then start getting a little bit agitated and making a comment. You'd make your comment and say, this is rubbish, there's no proof of it at all. But you quickly get bored for that very reason. You get bored because, well, who cares? They're never going to actually prove it, so who cares? But with the earth, that's a totally different ball game. It is flat. There's no way around it. As much as we can be instilled with as many belief systems and power structures to back them up if we find them out, it's still flat.
Yes, we have to remember how the globe came to us, and then how the history of the globe came to us. You see, the globe didn't come to us with Copernicus saying, I found this guy Eratosthenes and X, Y, and Z. The globe came by Copernicus developing it for a purpose, passing it on, the church then passing it on, first apparently protesting. I doubt that all priests are evil pedophiles. So there would have been people saying, dude, we can't do this. This is not true. So who knows what politics went on. But eventually, the church, which was in charge of all education in Europe, let's remember that. In the developed world, what we call developed, China was way more developed, and there have been places that have been a lot more developed than we are now, but we call the developed world part of our programming. Our nation is the best. Everybody thinks that. It's part of the programming. But the globe was given to us by the church who was giving education to the world, who was sanctioning wars. You couldn't go to war unless the church said yes. And as we saw with the Second World War, they said, you know what, we're not really sure who's going to win, so we'll be with both. You know, it's like, oh my God. Anyway, then sorry for those who are offended when I say the word God. But by the way, the commandment doesn't say you shall not say the word God. It says you shall not say the name of what you think is the word, God's name. So when people say God, they're not blaspheming. You know, it's saying the name of God that you're not supposed to do. Anyway, so so the globe was given to us by the church, who was basically a recollection of the Roman system. You know, Rome had collapsed, kind of morphed into the church. There's a heck of a lot of psychopathic soldiers around who enjoyed killing, who didn't have a problem with killing. And the popes of the time devised the torture instruments for the Inquisition. And we'd had the Inquisition for 300 or 400 years. Now, we've been flying for just over 100 years, okay? That's flight, 100 years. And this is at a point where things happen very quickly. Now, let's go back to when things happen very slowly, and the church for 400 years has been killing heretics. And the heretic wasn't somebody who worshipped some devil or some force of nature. A heretic was somebody who did not believe the church's teachings. It's not, you could believe in the Bible, you could believe in Jesus, but if you didn't believe in the church's teachings, then that's the end of you. So if you didn't believe the church's teachings, you were killed. Later on, you were just punished, incarcerated, expatriated, had everything stripped from you, all kinds of stuff. But that's what the church did when it was introducing the globe. Before it was introducing the globe, it did it for 300 years. Then it carried on for another 4 after it introduced the globe. So the church comes along and says, by divine knowledge, we have discovered that we're on a globe and that God and da. Who's going to question it? Because I'm stood here in my robes, and next to me are these guys with their swords. And you know that last time I was here, your village lost the most beautiful people and the people that you all thought were the greatest. All of them died screaming, and we were forced to watch it whilst the guy who decided that they should die screaming sat there enjoying it because he was a psychopath. Okay, this is how the globe got to us. Now, since then, the mechanisms have calmed down. But if we think of
softened.
Yes, but if we think of how the West has imposed central banking on countries that don't have central banking, it's death that they use. You know, it's pain and death. It's still the same thing they use. So we have to remember this. The globe started off through blood and suffering and screams. That's how the globe was given to us. Eventually people stopped saying, I don't believe it. And hundreds of years later, us saying, do you know what? None of us are getting killed for saying what we're saying, so we're going to say it. It's nonsense. And we are doing. Now, even if every single one of us was murdered in the most hideous way, the society we have today would not just say, oh, right, we'd better not say a word. No, they would cause such a reaction that it would crumble their system much quicker, which is why Mark Sargent, Math Powerland, Eric Dubay, why those people haven't been snuffed out. That's correct. Why.
Exactly. Okay? The floodgates have already been opened.
Yes. And whatever action they take is only going to backfire on them, and they know it. They do have very intelligent people working for them, and they know different mechanisms to use, ridicule, psyop, just systems to use to try to disturb us, destabilize or slow down, but it can't stop it. We are what they feared as the X factor in the report from Iron Mountain. that, you know, we can try and cover all bases, but there's always a possibility with computer models. There's always we can have everything worked out perfectly right and everything's going to run completely fine, but we can't cover all bases, like a power cut off. You know, the power shuts off, the computer dies. You know, what there are elements, the maverick inventor, the maverick mind, they can't expect, they can't predict, they can't put it into the equations, which is why they developed the term X factor. So they could say this could play a problem here, this could play a problem there. You know, the term X factor, that's what it refers to. Obviously now we have it as a TV show, just like we have Big Brother as a TV show. Big Brother is not to do with the monitoring that goes on in the streets and in your home from your telescreens. Big Brother is to do with the monitoring that you do yourself, that you impose on yourself. That's what Big Brother is about. It's an explanation of the mechanisms that would be pushed so that you endorse the system you don't want to endorse because you fear it. Not because you have to, but because you fear it. So, yeah.
I mean, that's a nice way to sum up and probably round out. I know we had a bit of 1982 that we wanted to go through, but I think that might be for another day.
Yes, 1984.
1984.
Yeah, yes. I will just say one more thing, though, please, if that's okay. Right now, one of the memes that we have, so the word meme, okay, it means it's like cliche, okay, or really easy to digest idea, okay? That's a meme. So Muslim terrorist, that's a meme. Say, hold on a second. The first terrorists were not Muslims, okay? But now we have this association, okay? Just like conspiracy theorists. These memes, currently there's a meme which is kind of linked, it links back to Zeitgeist, the movie. It's to do with how the system will change from a money and commerce and labor for time and money and all this circuitous, never-ending system that we seem to be in, and how it will change, hopefully, one day into a resource-driven economy without the need for money, which is really just a waste of time. You know, it's a promissory note. You could just, it's not necessary. I think eventually, you know, you will receive what you receive merely because you're a human, not because you're a human who does X, Y, and Z. The fact that you're a human would mean that you do X, Y, and Z. And we see this in all communities that develop voluntarism and anarcho-syndicalism. This was the reason for the Spanish Civil War, by the way. The Catalans said, forget the banks, we're going to... So we kept quiet. But right now, there's this idea that if you make money from the flat earth, then you have sold out. It's like, whoa, hold on a second. Look at that. Look at what you're saying. Let's say I'm making videos. Don't make a penny. You make videos. Don't make a penny. That's all right, because we get money from elsewhere. Somebody else makes videos, and they make money from working for a fracking company. Is that all right, that their money comes from a fracking company? Would it not be better if their money didn't come from the fracking company, but instead came from merely doing flat earth videos that other people enjoy, that help other people, that allow other people to help other people too? Wouldn't that be better? So the getting money from flat earthness, it's like, and objecting to that, it's like, hold on, you either object to getting money altogether, in which case you're not allowed to use money to pay your bills, to buy your food, and if you are living completely off the grid in a self-sufficient way, then bravo, you've done it. Unfortunately, not everybody can do that. You know, not only because it's not possible for some people, like literally not possible, but also because there are mechanisms set up by the bad guys to stop people doing that. You can't just go off into the countryside and build yourself a place. They'll come and arrest you. They'll pull it down. You know, it's just, let's be realistic. So I'm saying the whole idea that you have to challenge the idea of money in order to kill the system is one of the memes that is put out there, okay, is to help recognize the monetary systems, is to help recognize who's trying to set up a revolution, you know, what kind of language they're using, and is to put systems in place to undo those, to react to those attempts. We don't need to challenge the system. We don't need to try to not use money to kill the system. We will be doing that naturally. Some of us already are doing that naturally. I know a couple of people who are engaged in doing things that are very, very kind for free. They're labor intensive, you know. So it's already happening, but it's not by deciding that you will make your money some other way so you can survive, so that you can make videos for free. That's not, or interviews like Patricia Steer and Mark Sargent, you know, that people have been saying they're going to get money for their interviews and stuff. It's like, hold on, look into it. What they're doing is everything that they've been doing for free, they're still going to be doing for free the same way. And they're also going to be doing something else that you don't know anything about, that they haven't been doing, so you haven't engaged with. And that's going to be free too, unless you want the archive. If you want the archive, then you can pay for it. How can somebody object to that, you know?
I think your first example was a lot more pertinent. I mean, when you point it out that a guy could be working fracking, and instead he says, well, I won't frack, or whatever, I won't do the fracking. Instead, I'll make flat earth videos and make my money that way. That seems far more noble.
Yes, but somehow there are people who think, no, you should be doing absolutely nothing that supports the money system. It's like, dude, we're not supporting the money system. We're using the money system because it's here whilst it dies. When it's died, it will be gone, and it won't be replaced by a chip. It won't be the number of the beast, because that's predictive programming. It won't be everybody has a chip and all of that. That's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is eventually money will become some kind of coupon or some kind of card or some kind of something, and eventually it will phase out. In 2,000 years in the future, we're not going to have credit and cards and banks and stuff. That's not how it's going to work. And it won't be because the Georgia Stones, you know,
wiped us all out.
Implemented. No, it's just not going to be how it happens, because right now we know that the world is flat. We know this. We know that the habitable areas of the earth, the percentage of those habitable areas that are actually populated is 2%. That includes all of the roads through the countryside. So by populated, it's not just where people live, it's anything that's covered in concrete, in terms of, and anything that's used for agriculture, all the farming, all of that, 2% of what's there. So this illusion of running out of resources is another idea that was pushed out there.
The one thing they're not making any more of.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I reckon we should wrap it up right about there, Antonio.
Okay.
Fantastic. And I should give you credit because you came up with the title. So this has been Mechanics of the Fourth Wall with Antonio Subirats and myself, Nathan Oakley.
Let me just say, for anybody watching, he's giving me credit, but no, all that happened was I saw what Nathan was doing. I saw that it's a difficult subject to cover. So I said to him, look, let's get together and let's see if between you, let's see if I can't help you to cover the bases that require covering. I'm not convinced that we have covered all of them because it's a never-ending subject. It's a fascinating subject, but that's all I did. I said to Nathan, dude, I think what you're trying to do is really important, so let me see if I can help. That was all.
Right, you've been amazing, because I've struggled to verbalize this, and I think we could do probably another 10 shows just on this topic. But it's nice that it's flowed a little bit into flat Earth, so I'm sure the audience has been reasonably happy. They've been chatting away quite contently, I noticed. So once again, thank you very much for being here, Antonio. It's been wonderful chatting about this subject.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you, Nathan.
And to all of you who've joined us in the chat, as I say, this has been Mechanics of the Fourth Wall. I've been Nathan Oakley. I'll see you all in the next video.